Kakadosh Boker Tov, Shavua Tov. We're continuing with halachot of Siman Resh Samech Aleph, and we're actually concluding it. We have a very important halacha, which we were just speaking about right now, Kabbalat Shabbat. That once a person accepts upon himself Shabbat, so therefore it's already considered Shabbat, even though it's very, very early throughout the day. A very common question arises, though, what happens in a situation where you need to go in a car and you're going to light the candles? So, for example, in such a case, there is going to be a Rav Ben Zion Abba Shaul. Rav Ben Zion Abba Shaul comes and he says as follows. He says, even if a woman accepted upon herself Shabbat, you could be mekel that the husband will come and drive her in a car, even though the fact that when she goes in the car, it's adding on a little bit of extra gas. He says, since this melacha is done through the husband, and the husband did not accept upon himself Shabbat, so therefore you could be mekel. Now this is only going to be a lenient opinion only when it's still very, very much, meaning before Shabbat, that nobody's going to think that they're going to be mechalel Shabbat. Now even though this is Rav Ben Zion is speaking about the concept of a husband and a wife, right? The same halacha says of Shlomo Zalman Auerbach would be even with a regular person also as well, that for example, let's say I accepted upon myself Shabbat, and now there's a necessity. Again, we're not talking about for fun, because for fun, obviously not. But there's a necessity that I would go by car to another certain place. So therefore, even though I already accepted upon myself Shabbat, let's say I came and I davened the Plaga Mincha. So that means I said Mincha and Arvit early on Friday night, and all of a sudden there's a necessity for me to go by car. Now, I'm not allowed to drive. That's according to everybody. I'm not allowed to drive because for me it's already Shabbat. But if somebody else is doing the driving and they are doing all the melachot doraita, which means that they're opening up and closing the doors, they're doing everything. So therefore, all that I'm really doing is just sitting inside the car. That's all that I'm doing. So if it's on Shabbat, you have ziluta the Shabbat, you have uvdin dechol, you have marit ayin, you have all these different isurim that I'm not allowed to do because at the end of the day, I'm being mechalel Shabbat. Okay, so I'm sitting in a car, but it still looks that way. But since it's earlier than Shabbat, it's still before Shabbat, and the majority of the Kala has not accepted upon themselves Shabbat, so you don't have all these things. Because nobody knows that you prayed early, didn't pray early. The majority of people on the street, they're still running around doing their things for Shabbat. They're not going to start saying, this guy's being Mechalel Shabbat. So therefore, in such a case where there's going to be a necessity, again, it's not that simple, but there are shitot that you could be lenient, that in case of a necessity, you would be able to go into a car and they would actually come and they would drive you to another place, even though you accepted upon yourself the Shabbat. So that is, again, very, very important just for us to remember, because sometimes it does happen that a woman has to travel, but then she has to light candles at home, and then she's going somewhere else. So there is another way out of that also as well, which is basically she lights the candles, but she doesn't accept upon herself Shabbat. But that you could only do within half an hour of the Shekiyah. If it's going to be earlier than that, you do have that problem, right? That usually whenever she's going to light the candles, she accepts upon herself Shabbat immediately. So therefore, again, you have what to rely on if it is going to be that the husband will come and will drive her as long as she's not doing any type of melachot whatsoever.